Hello and welcome to the Curator's Salon podcast. My name's Geeta Joshi. My guest today is artist Christopher Kieling, all the way from Berlin. Welcome, Chris.
Hello, Geeta. Hello, nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much for making time to be on the podcast. I know you have a show coming up with Grove Square Galleries in a few weeks, so I thought we should have a little chat before that show opens. But let's start at the beginning of your career. I know you trained at Central St. Martin, so as a German painter, you spent some time in London. How was that experience?
London was a great experience. For me, really, it was the biggest thing that I took from university was really the wide range of things you were able to do, like the printing facilities, the photography studios that you're able to use, the equipment that you suddenly have access to. And coming from a background of not being artistic that much and working with street art and kind of like the graffiti background more in focus, it was really like all these chakras kind of opening for me to see all these different ways of expressing yourself and of mark making essentially.
And did you train in fine art?
I didn't actually. My course was graphic design, which to me at the time made most sense because I didn't know graphic design. I was always a drawer. I was always a painter. So I felt like it was another very important tool to kind of pack for my artistic career. And it really was. I was able to look and learn into typography and layout and all these very traditional ways of looking at design. And that really propelled my career forward and understanding of how to break up paintings or how to break up imagery and work with all these different influences coming together in design.
I often feel like actually graphic design has more rules around it, particularly around typography and spacing and so on. How's that influence your painting?
Very much so. Since that is my background, I like to plan out things a lot. So I like to have like an exact kind of plan of what I'm going to tackle or how I'm going to tackle the painting. Graphic design has taught me a lot, like just the technical aspect of using the programs as well, being able to use Photoshop in the Creative Suite and being able to use all the possibilities that you have nowadays to make images and to produce produce paintings essentially.
So when you left university, returned to Berlin, did you keep painting or did you have some sort of other career initially?
It was a little bit bumpy. I came back and I got into a design agency right away with a friend of mine, which was kind of a harsh reality after being in such a free-minded and open-minded university of Central St. Martin's, where everything's very, very artistic and very creative. It was really a lot of cutting out and a lot of photoshopping over and over again. It really was like it wasn't what I expected in the first place, but it was fine. It was a great way to learn and get used to working with big clients and having deadlines and those kind of things. So I guess there were different aspects which I learned from working in a bigger agency. But parallel, I was always painting. So I knew that I wanted to be a painter, and I knew that I wanted to only do that at some point. At the time, I was also setting up a screen printing workshop studio with some friends. We had some little studio in Neukölln, which we set up for courses and those kind of things, which horribly went wrong. It's like a lot of young artists, a lot of young egos clashing there, and like nobody really had the money for rent. I was the only one with a stable job at the time, so it was quite rock and roll. But it was really like the amount of pressure and the amount of different energies that were flowing into that time were really, really quite interesting. And like exactly that, having the balance between the kind of rock and roll art studio where everything kind of goes, and then being back in the office and having to essentially cut out a lot of things for for whoever it is for was a nice balance.
So with having, let's say, the day job that gave you structure, how did you transition full time into art?
It was really in stages. So I worked for actually several design agencies at the time. So I stayed at the first for a while and then switched to another one. I really wasn't happy in design agencies in general, which was a problem because that was a job that I've learned at that point. So I figured out that I needed to find a different way of making an income or creating a career. And I really wanted to continue the studies of painting that I've been doing like during the screen printing time as well. I was actually a stage manager. I kind of slipped into this weird job of being a stage manager for a double ganger show, which was very, very interesting. And again, completely different field. But that was really the last, so to speak, real job I had before I moved on to being a full-time artist. And that was around 2015, where I had a couple of solo shows that year, and it went so well that I just decided to go all in and try it.
And what sort of work were you making then?
What's that, sorry?
What sort of work were you making in 2015?
Figurative. I was very much working figuratively, but I was much more connected to the street art scene at the time. And coming out of the graffiti scene, I was at that time I was looking at the characters behind graffiti. So I think I was portraying street artists out of an angle where they're not completely. It was like this balance between being anonymous and being a character or an artist, and it was really finding a way to portray these people without giving away their complete identity.
It's always an interesting thing, isn't it, with street artists, because they want that notoriety, for this sort of underground thing that they're doing, but of course they want the fame and visibility at the same time. And we obviously see some street artists actually achieving both things, right, fame and anonymity. That's really interesting, because we also think of Berlin as very much a street art scene. Is this street art scene quite big over there still?
It still is very big, yeah. It's changing. It's changing a little bit. Berlin is changing like any big city is. So I guess the areas where you find graffiti are changing too. But the scene is very big, and there's a couple of people really are holding up the scene. And internationally, like especially in Europe, a lot of people come from abroad to go to Berlin to experience that. So we have a certain like graffiti tourism, which is still working well here. Yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely quite a lot of street art tourism in London as well. Yeah. I don't know if it's quite as strong as it was just a few years ago, but yeah, that was definitely a thing. Of course, like coupled with Instagram, it made visiting these destinations quite iconic. Let's fast forward a little bit and the development of your work, because I know at the start of lockdown you started creating this incredible body of work. And actually the lockdown and Corona, and all this staying indoors and everything was actually a big influence on the development of your work. Can you talk us through that?
Absolutely. It was right at the beginning. I was actually working on a study of figures at the beach, which was probably a subconscious thing of being in a really long German winter that I was painting beaches or open spaces. And around that time the lockdown happened, and I realized it was kind of comical that I was drawing these figures at the beach in these like open spaces, whereas on the radio, like the Corona, the danger kept on going nearer, and then Italy was affected and the first cases in Germany, and we knew that something will happen in the next future. And when it really did, it was a limitation. Obviously, it was a limitation in a spatial sense. It was a limitation in the sense of motives or subjects I could paint. Everything was reduced to what I had in my apartment, which essentially was a wall. It was my girlfriend, my dog, and little props that I found, like plants or chairs and such. And I decided to just carry on with the studies I was already making with these figures at the beach, and kind of let that influence really, or the situation that we found ourselves in, flow into the work by giving these paintings that spatial limitation that everybody experienced during lockdown, of not being able to go out, of being kind of stuck. And it's kind of like this play on someone who wants to be somewhere else. That's why she's wearing the bathing suits as well, which is an indication that she's really not happy being in front of that wall inside, but it's just a situation that we have to work with at the moment.
So working from home, was your girlfriend happy to model?
Most of the time. Most of the time she was. It did add up at some point, so she was a bit annoyed at some point, but no, everything was fine, and she's always happy to help out. And I think it's quite exciting for her to have a whole series named after her, and mainly depicting her in large scale. So I think we're all getting something out of it.
Brilliant. So do you have a super decorative apartment? Because in your paintings, there's some beautiful patterns, with solid colors and, whether it's lino or wallpaper and things. Do you have a decorative apartment, or is some of that imagined?
A lot of it is imagined. It is a decorative apartment, but not as decorative as my paintings might give you the impression of. No, it was really that. I really, it was part of this limitation that I had, which I was trying to overcome by adding complexity to these paintings. I was looking at tile design. I never did prior to that, so it was really like a new field to dive into. And I was looking into geometric patterns of mosques and cathedrals and how that evolved over the years. It's very interesting, really, if you deep dive there. Looking at dynamic geometry too, and looking how to break up a painting or bring a composition into it, which is as balanced as I wanted it to be. And the patterns were like a great vehicle for that. I was looking at Polya too, which is a mathematician who wrote a paper on crystallography, which was later a big inspiration for Escher's work and Escher's patterns. And that really gave me the drive of looking, because what interested me about his patterns is that there are all these structures which are found in nature. So it's actually cell growth, or it is molecular structures that are evolving. So it's this idea of infinity and growth, and that in contradiction with the spatial limitation of like a hard shadow on a wall. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, because on the paintings you get this really interesting balance of like flat with the patterns, and then a bit of perspective as well, because often it's on the floor or on the wall. But then this, the 3D form as well of the model in the chairs and so on as well. So how does this sort of lead you into the new work that you're making?
Well, the new work I'm making is I'm working with a lot of color planes, but I do try to bring a perspective into my painting. So it's really all about very careful color selection and nuances of the colors to create the perception of depth. And the technique is really laying down big blocks of color planes, basically, which are then arranged in a way that they all kind of come together, and this whole the image essentially arises from all these planes that I lay down. I like to work with really like the basics of what figurative painting is. So I look a lot at the composition, I look a lot at the color, and I look a lot at the form of who I'm painting. So it's all like these little adjustments that you tweak to get the ultimate final painting that the way I want it to be, essentially.
Do you work on several paintings at a time?
Usually don't. I sometimes do, but I do like to finish my paintings in one go. I like to have something completely completed, and I usually look at it for several days, because oil paint needs a lot of time to dry, so it usually stands in my studio for several days. And sometimes I come up with something I'm going to change, but usually it's a motivation for the next piece. I like to put that off the table and then move on to the next piece and take whatever I've learned from the previous piece into the new work that I'm doing.
That's so interesting, actually, using the one painting, that kind of letting that lead you and teach you into what you need for the next one. So Sierra, the exhibition at Grove Square Galleries, opens in London on the 8th of October and runs till December 2020. What are the other influences? Because I see a lot of other artists influencing your work, like Uglow, but who else do you sort of cite as a reference for, artists that you look to?
Uglow is a very big one. In fact, I very much look to him and to the whole Houston Road School art painters when it comes to figurative measurements and the way that they arrange their subjects and align it with the background, and everything seems very balanced, and I'm trying to achieve the very much same thing. So I'm looking at how the shadow is in relation to the perspective of the figure, maybe, and how that is in correlation to the overall composition of the piece. Everything needs to be balanced out, and I think those painters like Uglow, like Coldstream, they did a fantastic job of achieving that, and I'm very much looking towards or looking at their work in relation to mine, and trying to figure out how they worked, and trying to align myself with those painters.
Yeah, I think anybody visiting the exhibition will, if they're familiar with any of those artists, will definitely see the references that you're making there, which is super exciting. So Grove Square Galleries, as I mentioned already, where this exhibition Sierra opens, is a new gallery for the London art scene. It's based in Fitzrovia in London. How did this relationship come about? But also, can you talk a bit about exhibitions, or how you were selling art prior to connecting with Grove Square?
I was working with a couple of galleries in Germany and in Austria mainly. However, it was a very different feel. I have to say, like Grove Square is seems to be so organized and so well funded that they have the manpower behind it too to really like get the promotion going, get the PR rolling. Like it really is a different experience from what I had prior. Before that, it was a lot of on my own terms. I would have to drive a lot within Europe to visit and bring and pick up paintings all the time. Um, yeah, and I went unconventional methods too. I went to, for example, the Art Bodensee last year, and I was kind of in a pickle. I needed a gallery at that point. I was not being represented, so I literally just drove up with my car, put paintings in my trunk, had my dog with me. We put a little pirate flag on the top of the roof, and we just parked right outside the opening of the gallery, and that really got me a gallery. The people loved it, and I got yeah, signed by a Venetian gallery. Um, but that's really that's there's so many ways of really approaching this. The Grove Square was much easier. They contacted me online, and after showing their interest in my work over a couple of weeks, they asked me to arrange a call, and that was really it. I was very careful at the beginning because you never know what comes out of like these online when someone just contacts you via Instagram. But they seemed so professional and so friendly and so accessible and so transparent. Yeah, we really kicked it off, and so far it's going great.
That's so amazing to hear, because often, especially when people are setting up a new gallery and perhaps, you can't actually do your due diligence by looking them up and so on. You're right to be cautious, but I'm really pleased this one's working out. And I think they are doing a great job, actually. So you've got this show running in London, as I said. What are you working on in the studio?
At the moment, I'm painting dogs. I don't know exactly how I how I landed here, but I'm a big dog fan, and my whole family. I grew up with a bunch of dogs. My mom has five at the moment, my brother two, and I have one. So it's eight dogs in the family so far. Um, and I think it was a response to the more and more complicated world we live in with pandemics and riots and bushfires and all these things. Dogs always get me in a good mood, and that's the one thing that I can always justify. A dog is something. A dog is a better person, in my opinion. So it was really the influences or the composition from the Sierra series, which I'm developing, and I'm just giving my girlfriend a break and portraying some dogs.
That's so funny, because a lot of artists cite like dog portraits as like how they started, selling dog portraits on the street or something, and then actually evolved into this fabulous career. Are the dogs also sitting in front of a wall like your girlfriend, or are they outdoors? Because I know you were telling me about a trip that you had to Switzerland that was quite, how can you put it, impactful.
No, they're not inside. In fact, the trip to Switzerland was very eye-opening for me. It was the first time that I took a proper hike in the mountains. So it was the colors and the shapes that I was able to see there were so inspiring that I'm trying to take that influence and let them flow into my paintings at the moment. So as I mentioned earlier, I was working with open spaces or these studies at the beach of working with simplified backdrops or simplified scenarios, and that's what I'm trying to do at the moment with these new impressions I got from Switzerland. So I'm trying to take my protagonists, which in this case is the dogs that I'm painting, and place them in these sceneries of mountain peaks and mountain ranges and glaciers, and it's a very exciting thing for me. I've never really experienced or looked into landscape painting that intensely, so going to Switzerland and looking at a couple of local artists and also artists that have moved there or went there to depict these mountain ranges. One particular one that I really like is Hiroshi Yoshida, who did a series in his European series. He did a series of painting of the mountain range that I literally, my dad grew up in and I experienced from a young age. And it was quite eye-opening to see paintings from, or prints from 100 years ago, and being able to see the Grindelwald Glacier, for example, which I used to touch as a child, which is now completely receded due to global warming. So he actually made a statement on global warming 100 years ago without even knowing about it. And I thought just that learning or seeing that was very influential for me.
It's incredible. I think the other thing that you mentioned was, going back to the paintings in the Sierra collection, which were about repeat patterns and infinity, like molecular structures and so on, and crystallization, how they're sort of infinitely repeating. You made an analogy to that sort of actually being a theme that's still present in this new body of work, and how you're perceiving landscape as well, like the infinite horizons and so on.
Absolutely. The line at the center of a painting can be so influential. You can make it an open space. It can be the seaside. By the right color selection, you can give the viewer such different emotional responses towards it. It can be claustrophobic by creating a wall suddenly, but it can also be very, very open and inviting by creating the perception of having maybe a seaside or like a horizon and a blue sky above it, basically. So that very much plays a role, and I do like the idea of having a perspective. What I'm playing with at the moment is kind of breaking the expectation of the viewer a little bit. I was doing that in the Sierra series too, by creating backgrounds which allow the viewer to assume that it is a seaside or assume that it is a horizon leading out, by then adding shadows or hard shadows of the character on that background creates a weird distortion of what you would expect, because you don't know where the limitations are. On one hand, you have this idea of this open space. At the same time, there's a shadow, so you know that there's a limitation. And really, I like to play with that at the moment, to break with the viewer's expectations.
Yeah, like disrupting the expansiveness of what you're actually expecting. So Chris, what else have you got coming up?
Well, the next thing on my list is the Sierra exhibition in London at the Grove Square Galleries. I'm very excited about that. It's my first collaboration with the gallery, so I'm very much looking forward to it. I don't think I'll personally make it there, unfortunately, due to the circumstances, which is quite annoying, but I guess it will be documented enough to get an impression and to share that with my friends over here in Germany. There's nothing planned for 2021 so far, but with the new collaboration with Grove Square, I have my hopes are high that we're going to be busy.
Well, this looks to be a really good collaboration with that gallery, and let's see what the new year brings, especially because you've got this new body of work perhaps coming as well for next year. Chris, it's been amazing talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. I will share on Instagram if I make it to the gallery myself, of course, and I will add links in the show notes for our listeners to see your work and find you online as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the talk. It was great. Please let me know if you do go to the show, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch.
The Curator's Salon hopes you enjoyed this production.